Are-
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's call. Welcome to Cleveland Design Week, day 4. Can you believe it? Day 4. We started this journey on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and today is Tuesday. We have an amazing program prepared for you today. We have Roger and his entire team practically from Little Jacket Studios here in Cleveland, Ohio. He's going to talk with you about collaboration in the digital age. He's going to introduce himself and the rest of the team as they move along, but I did want to make sure that I said hello. I want to remind you that we have another program today at 4 o'clock outdoors. We know the rain is a little sketchy, but we are staying in positive spirits that we're staying in positive spirits that it's not going to rain, and that if it does rain, we're going to meet at the pavilion. So I'm hopeful that you all check out the website. I'll put the link in the chat so that we can kind of stay up on all the other things that are happening throughout the week. And I just want to thank you all for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Roger right now.
Thank you, appreciate it. Tasman, cue the deck, huh? Presentation mode.
Present.
Yeah. Okay, here we are. So those of you that are here for collaboration in the digital age, you are both in the right place, and you are about to get the script slightly flipped, I guess. We did this sort of meta, right? If we're going to do a presentation on collaboration in the digital age, as we do most everything, we collaborated on the presentation. And the first thing we decided was collaboration in the digital age. That's not quite right for the title of this presentation. However, we thought it was appropriate when you take a look at where the office was in March of 2020. Little lag here. Here's our lovely Little Jacket office, and as you can see, it's barren because, like everyone else, we were all working at home. So second idea was this could be collaboration in the age of COVID. That just sounded depressing and a little dire, so we kind of killed that one out quickly. And then we're really fond of saying that collaboration is how shit gets done. But we thought it was a little gratuitous and maybe not necessary to swear in our presentation. Oh, there we did it. So that made us laugh. And then, so moving on, we just stuck with collaboration, plain to the point, something Little Jacket has as a core value. And you know, that you'll see throughout the presentation that having this value of collaboration is something that kept us strong and safe as we all navigated through the shitstorm that was 2020. And we're not going to take questions as we go, but I would love it if you guys have questions or thoughts, even things you want to share, put it in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll try to unpack anything we can unpack together and give any clarification for anything I ripped through too quickly. Okay, so again, collaboration is a core value, but listening is something that I'm sure all good designers, but we value so highly here at Little Jacket. If you don't listen first, how can you start to understand what the questions are, what the opportunities are? And so as we built on collaboration in this time of challenge, when everyone was remote, listening first was absolutely critical. And it wasn't, again, foreign to us because in the next photo that you'll see is from 2017, and some have said we looked like babies. It was only 4 years ago. Collaboration started digitally and remotely at LJ as early as 2004, because we had someone in Fort Collins at some point, someone in Brooklyn, someone in lovely Canton, Ohio. There was just always, even starting with iChat, this sort of in our DNA, how we were going to work digitally and how we were going to still stay connected. So
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Everything good? Okay. Yeah, I'm Joey Parlett, founder, creative director for Little Jacket. I've been working remotely since pretty much, I could gently say day one at Little Jacket. So since 2004, there's always been some form of the company that has been operating through the means of the internet and sharing things through, I guess at that time was like iChat or something like that. But basically how we collaborate remotely is there's the, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, like Zoom, Slack, Toggle, Dropbox, Asana, Google Meets, and Google Suite are the more basic means by which we, do timing, talk a lot, do our file sharing and things like that. And the part that I'm probably more excited about that I get really into in terms of how we break up our individual bubbles and connect a little more is on the right side, the qualitative, try to make work fun human stuff. And that would be, I'll explain these a little more, but we have a thing called Okra, which is what I'll talk about mostly. And we have a water cooler chat. We have employee of the week. We have a thing called the Wonderwall. And then we have the future, which I'm sure we'll come up with new things as we get further into stuff. So Okra, it's just a nickname for a weekly meeting where we meet together and we talk about something one of us found on the internet. It's started as a business acronym. And at the time when we began this, the OKR was an objective key result, which was when our company was more of a strategy arm and a creative arm. The more strategy arm told creative that we needed to make some measurable goals. And so that ended up, we turned that into kind of a quick joke, and we just called it Okra after the vegetable, which really doesn't mean anything. But I think the joke is actually really good, where it, like, when we get together, which is usually the end of the week, we'll share an article, a blog post, a short video, a long video, design work, ad work. And more recently, we've been reading books together. And it was a time to just listen to each other and see what each other picks and shares and how that informs what each of us is into. And that's it's a way to qualitatively connect and kind of listen to each other internally. And so the beginning of each Okra, we had naturally, instead of getting into the homework right away, sorry if there's some extra noise, live in a loud urban environment. The beginning of each Okra usually starts with like a water cooler chat. So what we do is say we got our homework at the beginning of the week and everybody, let's say it was my turn and I shared an article. We usually, before we start to talk about the article, we'll get into like, hey, how was your week and what's going on? And it's sort of a absolutely intentional, I just called it like an intentional nothing. It's a time to share what's going on with you and just hear what's going on, and casual chit chat, the way you would sort of like creating a digital opportunity to have some of the randomness that happens when you're in an office together and you would maybe just go get coffee with your coworker. And out of the water cooler chit chat, we ended up sort of organically starting what we called the employee of the week. And the reason it's on this beautifully drawn Lincoln $5 bill is because the employee of the week gets $5. And it's intentionally sort of like $5 isn't going to change your life, but it is kind of like hopefully something as a little bit of an incentive, perhaps an expensive iced coffee to tell you you did a great job. And then sort of like, why do I believe in these initiatives? Well, yeah, like the slide is, it's sort of digitally, since we're all in these individual bubbles, like we basically just see each other in these little screens. How do we create an opportunity where we're looking at the same thing, or we're able to talk about the same thing, when often it's not very likely that like any of us here are really looking at the same articles or watching the same movies or anything like that. So how could we as a company sort of encourage like literally get on the same page, like the same web page, things like that. And from practice, it seems to be working itself out, where if we could sort of hear each other and be on the same common ground when we actually need to do some work and like critically communicate in service of our clients, that's when all of this other sort of qualitative stuff sort of actually comes into play.
So building that sort of foundation in the agency actually helps us explore it with clients, and so much so that we have invited clients into Okra. So we give them a little homework for the week, and they enjoy being part of the team. And Cuyahoga County Public Library is one of those clients, CCPL, that has joined us for Okra. And they specifically joined us really in the midst of the very first stages of the pandemic, when we were all on lockdown. None of us actually knew what was next, but it was CCPL's job to think about how might they reopen, how can they keep people safe when they reopen, and how might we message to people in a way that they just didn't put their guard up. And so when you were getting inundated with all this messaging, we sort of asked the question, how can we do it in an interesting way? And so I was in the library when it was completely shut down, just the South Euclid branch to be exact. And we had this notion that we could do the messaging through book haiku, which is sort of something you can Google if you want to see it on Instagram. So all ideas come from somewhere. And we also refer to this as book poetry. I guess that's a form of haiku. And we built this improv style with our clients. So the first thing we did is went into this closed library and said, what are titles that make sense given what we're trying to achieve? And then it can't be just a good title, it had to have a good spine. And so we were starting to build headlines in the library collaboratively together. So once we had the start of a bunch of headlines just like this, our client actually has great in-house capabilities. And I say in-house and I almost giggle, because in-house for them was someone took a photo booth home, or they rigged a photo booth at home. So though some of my photography friends are frustrated with this, none of our great partners in town shot this. This was shot by the client, and it worked just amazing. And they did a bunch of these so we could change them in social media. This, of course, was a favorite of ours. This is Too Close Bucko, a warning, 6 feet, please, keep it safe, keep us open. So that was like our overall theme that we executed in a variety of media. And lo and behold, not only did it kind of break through the clutter, it broke through the clutter of a international competition and was featured in the CA Advertising Annual last year, which is a nice little data boy in a year again where everyone's thinking, wow, this is pretty severe. So it's good to be rewarded and also to have clients that are awesome.
Sort of another case study in how do some of these digital means help our clients, because this was, the Warehouse District was one of our branding projects last year, and because of the circumstances we had, I think it was the first branding project where we did the entire branding process from start to finish completely digitally. So we basically we were just forced to do something new when we had no other means to get in the same room with people. So our branding, oh, there we go. Yeah. And the slide here is we did something new because we had to. And our brand process is basically split into three steps, kind of big steps. And within those three big steps, there are baby steps. And I think they're probably what a lot of agencies have and sort of build upon. But the part that changed the most for our process that relied much more on the in-person work was the discovery phase, where it's, I guess you could just say that's the phase where we're doing the most listening. And that would be where it felt really critical to be in person most often. So when we're doing the brand audits of the stuff that they have and their competitors, and kind of like interviews at one point were more often in person, body language and the sort of subtler means of communication. Workshops, that's probably where the most in-person stuff, where key stakeholders from the client side are in the room and you're able, like Roger usually leads those, and those are much more interactive engagements where we're really reading each other. So that part of the process was where last year just forced it all to go online. And it wasn't, I mean, it didn't end up being too crazy about how to do that. I think like Tasman was like new to Little Jacket and had worked for like a few months, and then we're thrown into the situation where we're completely digital, and then we figure out how to dramatically shift a important phase of a branding project into a hopefully interactive, engaging, thoughtful means of doing a good job, you know? So one of the ways was one of the workshops, we basically, you know, they start with a lot of questions. So a means of doing that was we just created an interactive Google form to collect some, kind of tell our client to do some homework. Like we thoughtfully went through, it was maybe like had a few pages to it. It had, we do an adjective interactive thing, and we had them write out and give us some of their perspectives on what the warehouse district meant to them, sort of what there's a lot of different angles about getting the perspective of what the client thinks about their own company or the key stakeholders. And one of the bigger things was this, we do a thing called like a we are not. And that at one point in our process was pulled from magazines. And it's basically like this exercise where you have the client connect words and visuals, where some clients are super, I mean, these days, I think more and more people are getting more branding, design. The design literacy is greater now than I think it's ever been. But any way you really can help everybody get in the same page about how pictures are also saying something is really good. So in this process, we used Google Slides, where it was more or less these mood boards. This was one of the photography pages, and we had green dots and red dots. And so in this meeting, individuals on the right from the client side were told to add a green dot to things they thought felt appropriate, that communicated what we had heard in the Google form, that made sense of alignment with what they want to communicate about the district. And then put a red dot on things that they thought were not working. And then like talk about it. And I think that's where maybe the real, I think there's more fruit or more tangible information from when somebody actually like does the physical action of, even though it was on digitally, like putting a green dot on something or a red dot on something, and then you ask them, why did you put a red dot on the image in like the top right? And then somebody says, well, because of this and this. And it could be any number of reasons. It's like, I don't like a guy wearing a tag, to I don't like green, or, and that kind of information, which is pretty subjective, like that would be turned into what we actually end up presenting with the client. And so kind of what we heard in the Google form in terms of like, hey, a critical part of our discovery phase is listening to the client, we sort of got to the point where like a key asset for the neighborhood was we heard the neighborhood's buildings are major assets, which was both obvious and not obvious. Like it could have been more about community than it was about the historic buildings or forging a new futuristic kind of warehouse district. But in this case, they definitely had an air of wanting to, it's important to preserve as well as look forward as well. So yeah, I think that was just one of the things. And so we had to, so if the buildings are the major assets, there was like, had to do some research on the architecture. And this is where being remote, like I couldn't fly to Cleveland at that time, and driving at that point seemed precarious as well, being that it was sort of like March, April, May, June, you know, it was like approximately June or whatever. And Tasman was in the area and was able to go take a great collection of architectural details and sort of the on the ground tangible elements that we would be able to use in the design process. And, you know, she did a wonderful job in capturing all of the wonderful like vernacular typography, textures of like the 19th century geometric architectural elements that are scattered throughout the entire neighborhood, and just getting basically like digitally getting a feel for and providing it to me for what the neighborhood is like. And that in combination with basically doing a very, I don't know if I've ever done such a thorough Google Street View of any sort of like 5-block radius of any city ever, of just like combing through, taking pictures. And it was actually helpful. And this informed basically the color palette of what we ended up doing for the end of the brand assignment. And let's see. Yeah, so this was like, this wasn't an architectural detail that we ended up going with, but when we were framing different concepts, this was one where it was, I guess, I don't know who here's like a font geek, kind of that level of stuff, but the like, you know, sort of an arch window and then like a slab serif that might relate to some of the stuff in the warehouse district. But we ended up going with more of a literal translation of the 19th century silhouettes of the building. And we didn't go with a specific building, but we ended up doing a geometric icon that was an abstraction of maybe like a few of the buildings. And so, which ended up being like the final solution. And it was more or less like born out of, you know, that whole process of listening, engaging. And I think that the whole qualitative part of our company, it wasn't hard to adapt really quickly for the purpose of an assignment with Tasman, because we were kind of talking about a bunch of different things already through Okra and our water cooler stuff. So it wasn't hard to understand like how this might happen. And I think, yeah, I think for a second case study, that's everything. And I guess we really zoomed through this thing, but I guess part of the description was seeing if like collaboratively or talking a little bit. So we definitely have this open for questions about the process. I guess we have some of the qualitative stuff, and then we have some stuff if you have questions about the case studies or anything like that.
I do have a question. I thought it was really interesting how you approached the sort of discovery discovery process. And just in your opinion, from having done, like, I'm assuming in-person sessions to like these more virtual sessions, is there anything that you would say is either more successful that, you know, you would maybe prefer to do in person, or something that you feel like is more successful in like the virtual world, like through that client discovery?
I mean, that's something we're actively discussing right now, where our first transition into our next branding assignment, we're asking ourselves, how do we take some of the direct engagement that we had with the virtual process and apply it to what is now, I guess, like a hybrid process. And I don't think we have a clear, we don't have a clear answer. We're sort of, there were I think the positive notes of the digital process was it was like an archival thing, and sort of the way we are on these screens, it feels like I'm engaging directly with you and things like the way it would be in person. But then like some of the subtler means of in-person communication just are really not like body language and stuff sort of doesn't like you lose a vast percentage of that when you're not in person. I like the archival document thing. I think it's kind of cool when the client can like engage, sort of, we're all comfortable on computers, and I like that part, but it's also, we don't know the best way of having it's to be determined how there's a good hybrid relationship. Like, how do you both have a good conversation and have people on computers? They're sort of, they're not completely incompatible, but they're also not completely harmonious. So it's sort of like open for debate of how that works. I don't know, Roger, do you have an opinion of like, how do you combine those two?
We can give like one little mini example of already how we test this and what worked and didn't work about it, but also just to build on Joey's point is, you know, today, 3 of us are sitting in a conference room together, but we're all on our own computer because it's hard to go back to the wide camera shot of 3 people in a conference room. It's so cold and distant where nonverbals can still at least be shared on screen when we all have our own monitor, our own camera. So that's like one really basic thing we're trying to figure out. Another thing is, you know, I don't know if in the future we'll do Myers-Briggs on our clients before we start an exercise, because we do have one client where we tested giving them the questionnaire, some of the digital tools, and we got about half filled out, and they really already know us, and they were just really anxious to get back in the room. So I think one of the things that digital experience gave us, and we know this from some larger organizations that we've played with, it helps so much at scale. So if you have a very large branding team you're working with, I think those digital tools that we developed will continue to be really, really successful. With small, intimate teams where there's an existing relationship and they want to point and they want to touch, you need to be in person. So like Joey said, the only thing I know is we don't know it all, and we're gonna just keep testing this hybrid.
You know, it was a really great thing that I could see translating really well. There was a point in that warehouse district branding project where we were working with a couple people that were the sort of key decision makers. And then at one point they told us that they needed to have a larger group of people involved in how, like, get their input heard. And so we ended up sending them like some digital documents and some of the works that Google form, sort of insider secret, mostly just to give them an opportunity that they felt heard. Like they were able to just interact and feel like they were part of the process. And it would influence possibly if they had a epic fit, like I think if there was a really dramatic shift in things, it maybe would have really influenced it. But it was really it was a great tool to make sure that everybody was engaging in the process. And I think that's like, I could see that definitely, if that happens in this other, like in the current branding project, I would do it like that. And it doesn't, I don't think it rules out their influence on the project. It's just as like, you could really give people an interactive opportunity without having to do a Zoom meeting with like 60 people. And so like that means it's really suited for that kind of scale thing. I forgot this was recorded. I was like, oh, that might not be the best thing to be recorded.
I have like one other question that just like came up as you were talking about that. So like, how do you avoid as people say, like design by consensus, where like you end up having all these different stakeholders or just people who are a part of the process. And then, it's almost like the client begins to manage your process, or begins to like, oh, we like that color, or our boss, he said that he likes the color blue, or and it sort of dilutes your sort of the thinking that goes through it, and in that process that maybe clients might understand, but like as designers, like we know that there's a process that you have to go to, and there's like a strategic like thinking. So how do you sort of avoid them sort of overhauling your process through like this sort of design by consensus mentality?
I don't believe it's unavoidable. However, I do believe there's like so you have the goal of hopefully getting it a little more out of the way. But to me, the closer I think probably Roger and I will have different answers, but I tend to have a working hypothesis that if you could get closer to the idea that like the words and images and colors and forms and shapes are communication, and then if you've agreed on the strategy up front, if they say they like blue, but they say they want to be really forward thinking, you then say blue is the most common corporate color in America. Therefore, if you want to be forward thinking, you're not going to go blue. So the closer you could have the visualization of the brand connected with the strategy, the more sort of rational argue, I don't want to say argument, the more proof you're going to have for why something looks the way it is. And it would be connected to a real, like a thought. And it would hopefully be connected to what you heard them say. So it would, hopefully you could just be like, you said you wanted to be forward, but then you told me you like blue. Those are not entirely compatible.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Is that,
yeah, no, that's super helpful. Thank you.
yeah, I definitely have a beef with, I guess our staff knows, I brought it up a number of times. Like, I think it's great when we say we like stuff. However, if we could get to a point like, and that's a start, it's great. Like there are things that are really cool and we like things and that's neat. However, if when kind of we're talking about a project, I definitely have a little more of a nerdy inner stickler that's like, well, what is it that's cool? Or what is it that's neat? Or what is it like that's resonating? And just getting some, and I think we did it in a recent branding project where it's like, oh, the client was like, I like that. I was like, can you give me a little more? And you don't have to, but if I could get a little more, maybe I could draw out like, oh, I didn't like it for a key communication need, I just liked it. And if you could just separate the subjective versus the persona that they want to exemplify through their brand, that's probably going to help give you the more like words around support your thesis better for your branding answer.
Right. Thanks.
Joey, as you were talking, I was really struggling with what you and I were thinking differently about, because
it might not be different. Yeah.
I was going to say, but at the very end, you threw out the gauntlet that I will just go back and say, it's small yeses along the way. It's building trust so that when you do have to say something that's relatively technical, you say it. But I will say that it's cool is like a point of difference between Joey and me, and we need both sides, because in the real world, your stuff doesn't go with the strategy. In the real world, your stuff is just experience. It needs to be emotive and stand on its own. So you got to listen to a client if some part of it isn't resonating for them, and you got to ask yourself, is this going to resonate with the key audience? Have we done this together correctly? And all of us then back, we have humility. And so with that humility is another way you build trust. But knowing when you're like, no, we really think based on this research or this insight, we've gone the right way. It just through collaboration, it makes most of those conversations much easier.
I also like that as a really, I'm a believer in like positive creative tensions, and I wouldn't want my sort of super my maybe gravity towards wanting more words around why you like something to win the day. I think there's a really healthy creative tension between cool and, you know, overly articulating what it is you think is cool, and they could exist in the same room and it would be okay. And I think that's the game we play anyway, where, you know, it both communicates and at the end of the day, like, oh, it just looks neat. But, you know, maybe, yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts?
I have a question if no one's going to ask one. I think it's really interesting that you guys learned all of these different tools. I'm just curious, what was the learning curve like? I mean, I know you said you've been doing it all along, but there are new communication tools that come out. I feel like they come out every 3 weeks. And so I'm just curious, like that process or that time to learn a new one. Does this fit? No, it doesn't. Let's try this one instead. Like, what is that
I
time?
could say we tried Asana for like 3 years until it stuck. That one probably is the clearest example of introduce something new. And we were doing a different time software for a while. And then Toggle, we tried it. And sometime, I think that was one where it just naturally worked okay. So there was a little bit of, I guess that's a kind of binary example of, there's one that we practiced and earned the sort of ease at which we're using it. And then the other one, I don't know, from my perspective, it just kind of worked. And it was sort of like a nice first date. And then we kept going with it.
And we aborted a bunch of software things that just didn't work too on the way to Toggle other timekeeping. There was one where we were a beta tester where we were giving continuous feedback to. They were very generous with their time, but the product just wasn't that good. There was another one prior to that that was good, but it just cost a little more than it should. So there is just a little test and learn that we've been through for a number of years that allows us to do that. And I think Joe did give the example of Asana being the one we hung around with the longest without, you know, and sort of brought everyone on board. But there's also a bunch where we'll try. Basecamp is actually not bad and people may use it, but we said goodbye to it. Trello is something that people use very effectively. We just don't, it didn't resonate with us.
I think also having like through the, I think making it okay to say that you don't like something as sort of hopefully a culture in the office. Like if somebody really doesn't like something and they say it, like, I don't know. I don't think we definitely don't have a disposition to force anything that isn't working for most people. So that's also part of it too. But and we're a relatively small place, so I do feel like some of our answers may not work for a company of 50 people, but for the small business approach, the more democratic vibe seems to be appropriate.
Excellent. I have one last quick one. So I love the detail and the process that you go through, but have you experienced clients who are not process driven? How do you get them to come over to the side so that you can do the work that you really, really need to do?
We can hide the process and the process. Remember, when you make a process like that, no one wants to say this, but you can do that process in 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. And so that it's adaptive. There are times when we're doing it intuitively. Not everyone's going to pay for discovery. So, but that doesn't mean you don't do some sort of fast primary research or some quick secondary research. I don't think you have to abandon your process ever. I think you could hide some of it or shield it from someone who doesn't want that level of participation. There are clients that even would say, I can't have more than 3 meetings during this process. Okay, here's what the critical 3 meetings look like. There are others that need to be involved more of a weekly check-in. So once you have the pillars, it's really adaptive. I think.
I feel like there's one project where we were working on small bits at once, and it's not ideal, but it is an ideal introduction to the client. So where the ideal would be more like a bigger umbrella and from start to finish in more of a less tactical way. But through doing a lot of small tactical assignments with that person, I think it's been really, we've been able to sort of plant the seed sometimes that, you know, if we do the next branding assignment with you, it might be really great if we did it more from a top-down approach versus a tactical approach, because the project might need that and it will make everything a lot easier. And that's been, and it, I think in hopefully set for our, like my own style is just hopefully selling in a way where like it isn't, it's not forced, like they can make the decision on their own whether or not, because I still want to work with that person in a tactical way. However, we've been clear, like if we could do it in a more process driven manner, it makes it a lot easier. And then the client, like having known us, is like, oh, you're cool. Hopefully I want to make it a little easier for you. And you know, it costs more, but then it's like, you could pay the same amount for a whole bunch of small tactical things, or maybe just pay more upfront and like be, you know, kind of get a better result. And, you know, but that's not always I think that's a unique circumstance too. So so you could reverse engineer it, maybe would be what I'm adding to that.
I want to make sure that we engage some of the others that are here on the call. I've been instant messaging and clicking with some of them to kind of join us in our dialogue today. I want to make sure that even though we are a presentation, that it is open where we can have those conversations. So would anybody on the call like to share some of the tools that they're using that Little Jacket did not reference, and perhaps talk to us about why you think it might work?
I recently, well, let me start back. I used to use monday.com, which is real similar to like Asana, for project management, and that worked pretty good. But it got a little pricey. So I was like, I'm not gonna keep paying for that. And so then I moved on to using something called Dubsado, which is more of like client management. It was good because you could have like contracts and emails and things like that, like housed in that little space. But I still found I constantly find challenges with like overcoming like the learning curve of new tech. And so it's almost like it's easier to sometimes just keep to your Google Docs, or, you know, you're already the processes that you've already developed. But I think it's also part of just developing in this digital age is just taking the time to just learn the software and learn what works best, because you can end up just taking more time. But yeah, right now, you know, even in my, I'm an in-house designer as well. So even in our in-house work, we're trying to find more ways to structure our project processes. So it's great to hear some of that feedback that I can bring along to my team.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Kyra. I really appreciate it. One of the COVID tools I learned how to use, Roger, you'll love this, was Miro. You know, being a longtime member of AIGA, IDSA, AIA, and CDPUG, we've had some digital prototyping that we've had to do, but the challenge was we always used Mural. So it's the MURAL. And so I forcibly had to get into Miro because they had an educator's discount. And so it took me a second, but now I feel totally addicted. And so now I'm trying to make other people use it. So that's my selfish story on the tech I had to learn how to use during COVID to collaborate in the digital age.
I actually looked into the Miro for the warehouse district remote brand exercise and was really intrigued by it. I kind of opened up like a trial and we did some poking around, and like oh, like literally like, oh, I'm gonna put this thing here and see what it looks like. And oh, okay. But the challenge that I foresaw is that within the workshop, we knew some of the people had some different comforts with technology. We didn't want it to be something that was incredibly new to everyone for the purposes of the workshop. And we figured that Google Slides, we kept coming back to it because it was like, well, we could literally just drop the link in the chat. And we're watching everybody do it. They're dragging around. They most people have a Google account. They don't need to like make an account to access it. But I was very intrigued about Miro, and I'm glad to hear that somebody is having a good time with it, because I think Roger had mentioned that Kenny uses Miro or has used Miro, but otherwise I haven't really heard from anyone who really uses it.
We're making boards. I do it with my youth programs. I do a lot of design thinking. I do a design thinking workshop online with a group of students in St. Louis, in Kansas City. And so what's interesting is that, again, when they first, oh, we got to click the link, like they were like, we got to click the link. And so I started putting animations in the boards. I started putting cartoons, little snippet cartoons for them in the boards. I'm just making it very playful and very visual. And now they're like, oh, the lady with the boards we can color on, right? And so
Cool.
the educator tool that they were using was like Padlet or something like that, but they much prefer this, the Miro, because it is very visual. So I'm having a good experience with it. So
Yeah, we use Mural too at American Greetings. Like, it's most of it is just like for initial collaboration, and I mean, at max we've probably had like 15 or 20 people in the board at one time, but whenever we're doing it, it's usually like alongside a Zoom meeting. So like the Zoom meeting's happening, there's a facilitator of the mural board, and then they're leading us along the process. And I found it to be very helpful, number one, to have a facilitator, and then two, to like just like Mural has a lot of like templates in it already. So like there's the what do they call it, Kanban board yeah, like that thing. And then like
Trello.
What was that?
Trello is one of the Kanban
Yeah,
styles.
and Mural has one of those too. Like, so they have like a bunch of those like different templates and stuff like that. So that's like really helpful to like have somebody initiating, have like a template already set up, like have any questions already on the board. Yeah, I enjoy Mural.
Yep. How about the rest of you all? What kind of tools are you using? What are you using? I'm just going to call on some faces so we can get some interactivity. I see Jason's face.
Oh, hey, yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, because we're in the same room, so I'm trying to make sure you can hear me from Roger's laptop. My audio okay?
Yes.
Awesome.
I can hear you just fine.
That's everybody, Michael. Yeah, so I guess in the topic of collaboration and the digital age, one of the things that was very helpful, but also kind of a learning curve, was finding a way to collaborate with my buddy Joey. As designers, we were tasked to kind of prototype website, and just to make things a bit more smoother from one person to another, to kind of cross-reference or to kind of just jump in and kind of like move things around. He had introduced me to using Sketch, and I was like, oh, what is that? Like, I've never heard of that. And so as I started, we had a couple of days already into the project, and knowing that there's a deadline, I kind of just took the initiative to just learn after hours, and it was fun. I'm always up for learning new software, cracking out YouTube, and yeah, just getting wired in, and then coming up the next day and like, hey man, like I got stuff to show you, and just being a team player. So
Yeah, you were really fast. I thought you already kind of like knew it already, the way yeah, it is intuitive, but you were like, done. Sketch Pro.
I got stuff to do. So yeah, so that was it's just always nice for us to always refine our own tools as we collaborate more in upcoming projects. So that's kind of one of my experiences that I took. And it's something that I value. It's just knowing what are we doing, how are we doing it, and just being a team player.
And no, thank you so much for sharing that. I know we haven't heard anything from Michael, Vicky, or Brian today. So before we end out, I would love to hear if you're using a tool, if you have one that we should be talking about, if you liked one that Roger was using.
I'll go. I'll mute my mic.
You're muted, Michael.
Hello, hello. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh, you might have to type your
Hi. This is the first time I've ever used a computer. So it's my favorite tool. This is gonna sound really basic, but I really like Google Slides. I think because they're not really precious. I think when you're building decks, some people can work on up front. Designers can throw creative work in. You can comment on stuff really efficiently. You can close out comments. It seems like so lame, but I've had a lot of good luck with it.
Most hackable tool. I agree with you. I agree with you.
That's it. I proved my worth for the day.
By the way, you could never tell that you three are in the same room.
Yeah. I feel bad calling on you. I felt bad.
That's good, I think.
I'm
right?
glad you gave him a chance to talk.
Oh, hilarious. Hilarious. Come on with that digital collaboration.
Using all the internet.
Brian, what about yourselves? What about yourselves? What are you using special, unique tools? What you guys using for collaboration?
I work at Twist Creative, and here we use Hive.
Oh,
It's a project management system, and it seems pretty intuitive. It reminds me of just like a social media platform, and they have chats, and it just seems really like you can find things like it's where you think they would be. And you get like a navigation at the top with your notifications and whatnot. So
excellent.
they're constantly improving their stuff too. So there's always updates. So sometimes that like throws you through a loop,
Mhm.
like anything. But
No, Vicky, thank you for sharing that one. I have not heard of that one before. We use HoneyBook at Design Explorer, but I'm always open. I'm always looking. Like I haven't officially committed, so I'm definitely going to research this Hive. Thank you for
so
sharing.
we started it right before COVID hit, and we were kind of using it. And then as soon like we were just doing things through like email and stuff. So like after COVID hit, I don't know what we would have done. So it came at the right time that was like our crash course in using it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brian, what about yourself?
I haven't really used any collaborative software, just, email, Zoom meeting here and there.
Those are all collaborative tools, Brian. Yes, you have been using Yes, you have been using collaborative tools. You are more savvy than you know. Have you, or what are you using for project managing?
I don't use anything for that.
All right, Roger, you've got a seller right here. We've got someone. They're ready to hear the pitch. They're good to hear the full pitch. Brian, thank you so much for sharing and speaking and letting us hear your voice today. I really appreciate that. Well, we're about 2 minutes from our end. I didn't know if you had any closing remarks, Roger. I didn't know if your team wanted to kind of leave us. How might we contact you to learn more about this thing called collaboration in the digital age? How can we reach out to you?
Well, there we go. Roger at Little Hyphen Jacket
Okay.
Go ahead and reach out if you guys like. Also, LinkedIn's always a good way to connect. And
Also, yeah, same, Joey. I think
oh, Joey's on mute.
oh, am I on mute right now too? Oh, that's odd.
You're good, Joey.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. I was just gonna back up any one of our names at little-jacket.com is where you could reach us.
Excellent. And then
Yeah,
in
you can-
It's a small enough
So-
group where it isn't like, yeah.
We're all people.
we're all people. Well, in closing,
Real
I know it's going to be hard since we're not together. We've been trying to do content and highlight each of the sections. If you go to the Cleveland Design Week page under highlights, you can kind of see where we've been at for the last couple of days. But I want to take a group shot because this is going to be our official group shot photo. So I'm so glad everybody's got their camera on. If you want to do your wild and crazy to represent yourself, now is that moment. You've got 1, 2, 3. I know. Look at Roger trying to get it gussied up. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. This is it. Smile big. Okay, I think it did it.
I missed it.
All right. Thank you,
Wait,
guys.
I think I blinked.
Yeah, that didn't work out. It's
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you all so super much for coming, for participating, for emailing me and being a part of this and helping to represent and show what our creative community is all about. I look forward to seeing you all at tomorrow's event with Malcolm Moore. And then on Friday, we have the watch party for AIGA's Design 730 Awards. And we've got this amazing IDSA demo as well. So please stay in touch. If you don't have the links or the calendar invites, let me know and I will make sure you get them all.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
This was very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Most
You're
definitely.
welcome.
Thanks
Sure.
for coming.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.